My dear friends, today's topic is one that governs the quality of our lives and relationships in very significant ways. So it's worth spending a few minutes exploring judgment, its dimensions, and impact. Now, I've chosen the title, The Compass of Judgment, because judgment has many dimensions, and it can lead us in endlessly different directions. And hence, compass is the best way to capture the essence of its power. Now, we all need to start thinking about judgment as a power that can be used positively and negatively. And this power lies squarely in our very own hands, each one of us. So, what is judgment? By definition, judgment is the ability to make considered decisions or come to sensible conclusions. Therefore, judgment is something we all exercise all the time. Now, what are the levels of thought in our minds that we engage when making a judgment? So there are three levels at which we make judgments. The first one is the thoughts we create in our lower level mind. Now, these thoughts drive our typical and basic sustainability decisions like feeding ourselves when we are hungry, drinking water when we are thirsty, turning the lights on when it's dark, etc., etc. Very basic level thoughts and judgments. And we draw upon our lower level mind to make these simple decisions, which are usually based on one or two scenarios at best. So that's easy stuff. Hence, we won't spend much time on this level today. Suffice to say that we acknowledge its presence and role in our lives. But the second tier covers the thoughts we create in our higher level mind. And these include thoughts that enable judgments of much greater significance, like where should we live? Where should our children go to school? How we manage our quality of life? How we plan our career and business opportunities? How we enhance our family's security? And more. And you can write a list of your own, and it's endless. But these are higher level judgments that we all have to make. They are more complex in nature, and these are thoughts that take into account many different scenarios and options. And hence, in this regard, our judgments are based on lots of factors, most important ones including facts, and then, of course, possibilities, all of which we process in our higher level mind. Now, our perceptions also play a very big role in our judgments at this level. And this is an important point to note. What are perceptions? By definition, perception has two aspects. Firstly, it is thought of as the ability to see, hear, or become aware of something through our senses. So perception relies on the quality of our senses. And this is what is understood by the normal limits to human perception, because we only have five senses. So once we max that, that's the limit to our perception. But the second, which is more interesting, is perception is the way in which something is regarded, understood, or interpreted. I'll repeat that. Perception is the way in which something is regarded, understood, or interpreted. And this is the more important definition of perception. This is what we have to consider when we gauge the quality of our judgments. Because you see, in life there is perception and there is reality, and we all know that. Reality is the absolute truth or fact, and that stands in a league of its own. But perception is a very individual matter, because it relies on one's understanding and interpretation. Remember, understanding and interpretations, which can often take one very far away from what is real. So let's explore this further, because how it impacts our making of judgments. So let's start from a very simple base, like our law courts. Now, those of us who've been to court have seen the judge at work. where he or she listens to all the arguments, notes all the facts, and then passes a judgment. In the end, his or her judgment is influenced by perception and interpretation. But there's also a heavy reliance on facts, which is good. Not perfect, but good. Now, when juries are involved, then we rely on the judgments that are based on the perceptions of 5 or 10 or more people. Now it starts to get more complicated. And the role of the lawyers is a separate matter because they can often play with perceptions to drive the case in whichever direction they are supporting. Fine. So this is all a good opening scenario with respect to judgment and how our perceptions can make it subjective or even questionable. My dear friends, one of the major questions we must all consider is whether our judgments are fair or unfair, reasonable or unreasonable. We have to constantly question the quality of our judgments. Now, most of us can make positive judgments and sound judgments very often. And then at other times, we can also make terrible judgments, which can adversely impact others. Now, we all know about the positive and good judgments we make, so let's continue to make those. No need to change anything because if it's not broken, why fix it? However, let's explore our vulnerabilities through which we often pass terrible and damaging judgments. Let's explore those because we pass these judgments without ever pausing to question ourselves and our judgments. In addition to perceptions, our judgments are also often influenced by many other factors, such as our emotions and state of mind at the time of making a judgment, our biases and opinions, which often disregard the facts in front of us. We often see programs on TV, for example, that highlight how as the society we base our judgment on racial biases, and how often the color of one's skin often influences how we judge him or her. And this is no secret. It's a sad reality, a very sad reality, and practiced more often than not unknowingly. People don't go out there and say, I'm going to be racially biased. It's an unknown phenomenon. Now, such unfairly biased judgments can impact people's lives in drastic ways. For example, many innocent people may have ended up spending their lives in jail, or even worse still, lost their lives because of the way they were judged. So there is a drastic impact, and especially if they were judged based on racial, religious, or cultural biases, because when these are invoked in the judicial process, then highly unfair decision making begins to govern. So, my dear friends, we are all vulnerable to the power of judgment of our fellow beings. And our fellow beings are equally vulnerable to the power of our judgment. So, another example to consider is where if we don't like a person, or the way he or she behaves, or the things they say or do, because it triggers our ego negatively, we stop listening. And we stop listening to the facts and looking at what is real. We simply reach an emotional judgment. And this is usually the wrong one. But we don't care because it's ego triggered. And in today's world of free-flowing information, our judgments are also at great risk when we as a society get programmed by being bombarded by false statements often enough, because we make them true in our minds. A good case in point is how the concept of fake news or fair elections was drummed into people's minds repeatedly until very large numbers of people made it the truth through no fault of theirs. But that's how we are programmed. And therefore, even our democracy can be severely affected by such programming. And there are smart operators out there who know how our minds are programmed. And they press the right buttons, and there we go. We pass our judgments and refuse to believe any evidence that suggests that the truth we have created may be wrong. Now, everything I'm telling you today, you're very familiar with. Then, of course, there is rumor. And we are all guilty in small and large ways of creating and spreading rumors. Everyone loves to gossip. With social media, there's an even bigger global platform for our rumors and gossip. And sadly, though, these rumors and gossip adversely influence the judgments of people towards one another, most of the times unfairly, very unfairly. And we as individuals and societies have become very, very judgmental. And while few of us realize this, we have become sources of hurt, pain, relationship breakups, and considerable emotional damage to ourselves and to others. Remember, life is a full circle. So what we start comes back to us at some point in time and in some shape or form. So we have to think of our judgment and judgmentalism in a more profound way. And let us think of judgmentalism as being a virus. It spreads and afflicts everyone in its path. And we all know a lot about viruses today thanks to COVID. Imagine each time we act judgmentally, we release a virus, a potentially dangerous virus. So it is time for us all to be very careful, I believe, and guard against judgmentalism, which we all practice most of the times unknowingly. I'll share a very simple, light-hearted example which shows you just how easily the virus of judgmentalism spreads. When we lived in the States, one of our colleagues was a very good-looking young man, and we were all having lunch in our regular restaurant, and he walks in, and there was just us bunch of guys, and most of the guys at the table were quite envious of this man because he always ended up with the most beautiful women. So, these guys, one of them looked at him and said, so when did you last stop beating your wife? And this guy laughed, and everybody laughed because we knew he wasn't married, and he was the perfectly eligible bachelor. And so we all laughed, and he laughed. But in the minds of everybody, there was a seed sown that this man beats women, even in the middle of a joke. So what happened? A month later, we went around the rumor mill, we heard that same comment come back as, oh, that guy beats women. I imagine it started as a joke at the table, but this is how the mind is programmed. And it sits in, and somebody goes and repeats it, who repeats it to others, who repeats it to others, and it becomes reality, a wrong reality, actually. And this guy was branded for beating women just because of a joke. So in my book, Towards Zero Conflict, I've offered what we call seeds of resolution, which are thoughts that help us recognize the sources of our conflict. And there is a chapter on judgmentalism because it is a significant source of conflict. And I have shared a very effective, simple but effective seed of resolution for judgmentalism. Let me practice it with you. I'd like you to just sit back and close your eyes. Close your eyes, take a moment, be completely at peace, and breathe freely. Now imagine that in front of you there is a clean white sheet of paper. And you're looking at a clean white sheet of paper. And then on it, in beautiful artistic handwriting, all the truth about you is being written until that page is completely full. So now look at this sheet of paper and how much truth is written on it about you. You don't need to read what is written, just look at the full page. Beautiful handwriting, but that's the truth about you. Now turn this sheet over, turn this page over, and look what there is behind it. It is plain, blank, and pure white, and there is nothing written on it on the other side. So when someone sees you, all they see is this blank side. When you see someone, all you see is this blank side. How then can you profess to know the truth about anyone when all you can see is a blank sheet of paper? You have absolutely no clue about what is written on the other side. So how qualified are you to judge anyone? How qualified is anyone to judge you? My dear friends, we are certainly not qualified to judge each other. Absolutely not qualified. And you may now open your eyes. And as you internalize this important seed of resolution, it'll start to grow in you. And the next time you find yourself being judgmental, this blank piece of paper will appear before your eyes. And I've had lots of feedback from people who practice it. It appears and you go, oops, I'm doing it again. So embrace this seed of resolution because it'll only make your life and the lives of others much better. So now let us explore the side of the paper on which the truth about you is actually written. And this is where our scriptures offer some very valuable insights. And many of them talk about the day of judgment. And we've all heard about the day of judgment. The minute we hear that, it invokes all kinds of horrible images in our minds. But when the scriptures talk about the day of judgment, they also mention that there is an angel that sits on your right side and another angel that sits on your left side, recording the truth about you. So what does all this mean? Now, in the days these scriptures were revealed, humanity was still at an earlier stage of intellectual evolution, and they only understood punishment and reward. Hence, the interpretation that prevailed was that the truth about each person was being recorded by these two angels, so you couldn't change anything. And then after death, there would be an accounting of everything, and then punishment or reward would follow. So what did this interpretation achieve? It achieved a few good things. It forced people to follow the teachings of the scriptures, especially the ethics of living. And with the reward or punishment outcome, it instilled or invoked enough fear in each person to keep from doing wrong. So historically, this approach has worked with varying degrees of success. However, today, we are intellectually evolved enough to see other meanings to these profound phrases and scriptures. The way I see it, the day of judgment is a continuous process. Every moment of our lives, which constantly encourages us to judge ourselves. So the day of judgment is a constant process that encourages us to judge ourselves based on the truth about us that is written on the side of the paper that we can see. Remember, you are the only one who can see the truth that is written about you. No one else can. And this judgment you can only make in the present moment because the past is gone. Are you still alive in the past? Of course not. If I reverse, if we're sitting here now and I look back at something yesterday, I was alive then, but in that past moment, I'm not alive anymore. So, for all intents and purposes, you have, in inverted commas, died when it comes to those moments of the past. Because died means you're not alive anymore and you're not living in those moments, so you have died. And you're only alive in this present moment. So, yes, the present moment is in fact your day of judgment. And you will take very honest account of what you have done in the past and then learn from it. And then correct yourself in this present moment and in moments to come, which is the future, where you have not yet been born. So think about the present as when you are truly alive, and the past as the moment you lived in and experienced, but are no longer alive in, and the future as moments to come in which you have not yet been born. So when the scriptures say day of judgment comes after death, of course it does. Death from the past moments, not necessarily physical death. So our interpretation here has no conflict with what the scriptures say. It is how we interpret the word death and its timing. Some scriptures even say that at the end of each day we die, and in the morning we have a new birth. So time is simply a relative concept. Many scriptures say that. Next, the reference in the scriptures to the symbolism of the two angels is also excellent, because in every situation there are three sides. So you all remember playing on the seesaw in our playground. So positive perceptions sit on the right-hand side of the seesaw, negative perceptions sit on the left-hand side of the seesaw, and in the middle is the truth at the center of the seesaw, which is absolute and unchangeable. So the angel sitting on your left-hand side is no other than your higher self and your intellect, who can seek out the truth in your negative perceptions. And the angel on the right-hand side is no other than your higher self and your intellect, who can seek out the truth in your positive perceptions. So, my dear friends, this is how you go through your moments of judgment within yourself, because you do know your truths. We can all lie to everyone except ourselves. So, through these examples, we can see how scriptures encourage us to maximize our learning from our experiences by refining one of our greatest powers, our power of judgment. And if you learn to judge yourself in this way, then your constant day of judgment is with you, and you will start looking at your fellow beings differently. You won't judge them anymore, but you will do your best to understand them. Hence, the historically feared day of judgment is in fact your constant teacher of the truth that makes you a better person every moment and gives you lots of opportunities to correct yourself constantly. Such a day of judgment, which lasts an entire lifetime, is one of the greatest gifts upon each one of us that has been given by our Creator. It is to be welcomed, not feared. Furthermore, when we seek to judge ourselves, as I have described above, we have to rise in our mind to that third level. Remember, I said there were three levels: lower level mind, higher level mind. Now we have to judge ourselves with that level of honesty and closer to perfection. We have to rise to the level of the intellect, which is the border between the conscious mind and the superconscious mind, from where we all draw our enlightened thought and inspiration. So inspiration and enlightened thought comes from the intellect. So when you raise your thoughts to that level, then you will be judging yourself in the best possible and most objective possible way that you can. So please do revisit the masterclass video called Power of Thought, where we learned how to invoke inspiration and how to engage with the intellect. It's a wonderful video. At the end of this video, we will provide you references to which videos to watch. And along the same lines, also revisit the video called The Power of Knowledge, because again, it covers this subject in a very holistic way. The power of thought and the power of knowledge. And while we're on the topic of judgment, using inspired thought and intellect, I have also shared with you a technique on how to use the pearl to make inspired decisions by elevating your thought process to the highest level of your being, to seek guidance from your higher self. So I've shared that technique with you. This video is called Meditation of the Pearl. For those who haven't experienced this technique, please do try and learn from this video. So at the end of this video, you will see references to all three videos. Take the time and watch it. Apart from hopefully enjoying it, you learn a few interesting new things which you can put in your bank of food for thought. So my dear friends, I'd like to conclude today's insight on the compass of judgment with the following short story from the scriptures, which I will paraphrase to keep it short. And this is the story of the great prophet Moses, who goes on a journey of learning with his great teacher. Apparently, prior to this journey, he had slain someone, and he was a wanted man, and then he escaped, and then he goes on this journey of learning with this great teacher. But the teacher said to him, "My condition for taking with you on this journey is that you observe everything I do, but do not question. Just observe and learn, but do not question." It's fine. So Moses goes with his teacher, and they come to a lake where there are these people waiting for them, and they take Moses and his teacher to their island, and very hospitable people looked after them, and Moses absolutely loved every moment there. And then they sent Moses and the teacher with one of their people back with the boat to drop them to the main shore. When they got to the main shore, the teacher takes an axe and scuttles the boat and chops it into small pieces of wood. And Moses is shocked. He said, "These people took us on their boat. It's the only boat they have. Took us to their island, hosted us so well, bring us back, and all we can do is cut up their boat." So he asked the teacher, "Why did you do that?" And the teacher said, "Remember, I said to you, observe what I do, but do not question, learn." Then they're walking in the hills, and they come across an elderly lady who is leaning on her son. And son was a teenage kid. And the teacher takes 2 steps forward and with the blow of his sword kills this child. And Moses is absolutely horrified. He said, "This child supporting his old mother has done nothing to us. Why did you kill him?" And the teacher looked at Moses and said, "I told you, observe, but do not question. If you do this one more time, you will no longer walk with me, and I have nothing to teach you." Fine, Moses said, "All right, I don't understand any of this, but I'll go with you." And then they end up in a town where there was these 2 orphans and their family who received Moses and the teacher in their home. Now, the father of these orphans was a very wealthy man, but he died suddenly, and after he died, the boys and their mother, family were all destitute because they had no resources, so they were starving. And what they did was they hosted Moses and his teacher with the best of foods that they could gather together. And Moses was deeply touched. He was so happy. When they were leaving, the teacher finds this big piece of metal, like a sledgehammer, and he breaks the wall on the extension to the house that the father had built. And the father had built that extension because he wanted to grow their home. And this guy went and broke the wall on the side of it. And Moses looked at him and goes, "Why on earth did you do that?" And the teacher said, "That's it. I gave you 3 chances. Now I refuse to teach you. I'm going my way. You go yours." And Moses said, "I don't care, because if this is what I have to learn from you, I'm better off without it." And the teacher said, "Sure." He said, "Before you go, let me tell you why I did those 3 things." He said, the first situation of the boat. He said, there was a king who was out looking for all the male offspring of these people in his land, because someone had given him some kind of a prophecy. And so he was going out killing all the little boys. And when they got to this lake, they had no way of getting to the island. And he said, I destroyed the only boat they had. So I saved that whole island from destruction at the hands of the king. And Moses pauses and thinks, and he said, but what about that young man and the old mother? And the teacher says, that child was the devil himself. And I killed him because as he grew older, he would have become a terrible being who would have caused his mother so much hurt, and he would have caused such devastation in every place they went with all their families, that the mother would die of a broken heart. So I killed him. And I spared her from that level of grief and misery, and I spared everybody else from the hands of this demon. Moses goes, okay. And then what about the 2 orphans? And he said, did you know that the father of these orphans was a very rich man? He had stored all his wealth and treasures in this place, in the extension which I broke. So when these kids went to repair it, they would have found their wealth, they would have been wealthy again, and they would have been happy. So my dear friends, behind every perception is a truth that we may not know. Even the great prophet Moses learned the hard way. So let's not be hard on ourselves, but rather try our best from today to, number 1, consciously recognize our power of judgment. Number 2, appreciate its positive and negative impact. And then thirdly, dig deeper into our perceptions to find the truth and learn from it. And fourthly, refrain from being judgmental at all times. And finally, be grateful for the day of judgment, which is our constant opportunity for deep and honest introspection, learning, and gaining knowledge. So with that, I'd like to conclude. Thank you very much for your time. I wish you a good day. Stay happy, stay blessed always. We are going to add the thumbnails of the 3 videos which I mentioned here. Please do take the time to enjoy it, and I look forward to seeing you at our next event. Take care and God bless.